What's good, guys? So in this video we are gonna be comparing two popular no-code tools. The first tool we're gonna be comparing is Bubble, and the second tool is gonna be Adalo. So I'm gonna be talking about the major functionality and how it differs, and this information is hopefully gonna be useful to you when you are thinking about which of these tools to use and to build with your next app. So let's get started. So the first major difference is that Adalo is a mobile first platform. And what that means is that if I go in here and I say I want to create a new app, and typically I use Adalo a lot to build native mobile apps. And you've probably seen all my videos. I have lots of apps that are mobile apps. And so if I come in here and I do native mobile app, I press next, I can pick, a template. I can do all that. I hit next, I pick my app name, test one, something like this. And right away, I have a template of a mobile app. So here's my template. And all of these UI components are mobile first. They are mobile optimized. So it's very, very easy. Let's say I want to add a screen. I can just come in here. I want to add a component. I can go back here. I can, drag and drop a button. So I can start building these UI elements very, very quickly and easily. Whereas with Bubble, it's a little different. Bubble is not mobile first. Bubble is primarily used to build web apps or web pages. That is what Bubble is primarily used for. So if you are going to be building something like a mobile app, whether this is going to be a production app, it's going to be an internal app, or maybe you're building a prototype for an app that you're thinking about developing, maybe using something like Swift for the Apple iOS platform, or whatever your needs are, Adalo is typically easier to get started with because you have all the components, everything is mobile. It's very, very easy. You can create new components, stuff like that. Whereas with Bubble, you don't really get that functionality. It's used for something else. The next major difference is the UI. So here on Bubble, we have various UI elements. So we have the visual elements, we have containers, and we also have input forms. So when it comes to UI, Bubble is one of the more comprehensive no-code platforms because they give you a lot of different components, a lot of things, and plus you can create plugins that become their own components, stuff like that. So for instance, you see it says here, search and autocorrect, Stripe. So all of these things here, after built on Bubble, right, starting from search and autocorrect, this is done using plugins. So if I come in here, I have Stripe here, and I have the search and autocomplete. This is actually a plugin. And within that plugin, there's actually an element, a UI element, which is why we see it here. So I can drag it here, and now I have a plugin that does various things in my UI. Whereas if we go to Adalo, Adalo is a little bit simpler in that respect. So we have our components, we have our list, we have our navigations. And the other thing about Adalo is that I can explore a marketplace meaning that custom components, perhaps somebody else created. So here we have a custom components created by Adalo, we have a calendar. And if we scroll lower, we scroll down, we have by Minimum Studio, we have QR code generator, and you can build these components if you know a little bit of JavaScript. So you need to know JavaScript and you need to know React. And it's very, very easy. So even if you don't have much experience with that, it's not going to take a long time to build it. But that is a main difference. And once again, I believe with Bubble, you kind of have a very extensive offering. It's very extensive, whereas Adalo is a little bit dumbed down. It's a little bit easier, which is kind of why I like Adalo for a lot of simple things. But if I need something a little bit more complex, I typically go to Bubble because it gives me a lot more options. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the logic, okay? You can have all the UI stuff. You can have, all the elements on the screen. But if you do not have logic, you don't really have an app. So with Bubble, the way this works is that, so let's say I want something to happen with this element. I simply double click on it, click on Start and Edit Workflow, and now I can create my workflow. So for instance, I already have a workflow for this element. I can delete it right here. So now I have when text checkout is clicked, text checkout is clicked, I can start adding actions. So I have an account, navigation, data, email. So there's a lot of things I can do. But in my view, Adalo made it very, very elegant and very, very easy. So the way it works is that let's say I want a button. So I come in here, I want to add a button. I have my add screen and I search for button component. I drag and drop it here. And now if I scroll down on that component, I have here add action. So if I add an action, I have here create, update, delete. So it's kind of like CRUD, right? I can create a new user. I can update, the elements that I'm working with, the data I'm working with. Or I can have a link to the next screen. So, let's say I want this button to do some kind of manipulation on existing data. And that depends on which data we have. So with this screen, the data we're passing is the user, right? There's the link. So if I go to this link, so if I go to this login and I go in here and it says here submit button, this is passing in the login user. So if I click on it, it's redirecting to the home page. And obviously this page is going to have access. The login user is like a global variable. All the pages are going to have access to it. But let's say you have kind of a list view here, and this is going to be a detail view. Well, when you click on an element on your list, it automatically is going to pass data that you click on. You don't really need to do it in Bubble. In Bubble, it's a little bit more complicated. So for instance, if I do something like this, and I have a simple list here, and then I click on this list and I add an action, and I say, well, I want to do a link to a new screen, okay? And I say this screen is called screen 1, something like this. I create this new screen. Now, this is going to be a detail screen. And I say this is a list of users. Now, when I click on it, it's going to pass current user automatically. You see this link? If I remove users, if I remove this list, it's not going to know what to pass. So with the dollar, it's a little bit more elegant in my view, right? Because I can go to this button, I can say add action, I can say, well, I want to link to the new screen. So I can, for instance, put this button here, and I can go in here, add an action, I can say link to this screen, to the screen that we have here. And it automatically will determine if there's any data to pass and what data to pass, okay? Very automatically. So for instance, in this idea, on this screen here, it's not gonna pass any data because this button is not part of this list. But on this list, right, I scroll down and I say add another action. I say I wanna link to the screen. In this case, it's gonna pass the current user because it's inside a list. So it takes some time to kind of get around it, but I believe with Adalo, it's a little bit more elegant. It's a little bit more user-friendly as opposed to Bubble. Because with Bubble, for instance, I have an element here, I double-click, I go start edit workflow, and here I need to do something. So let's say I need to do navigation. I'm going to say, let's do to the next page. I can say go to the next page, let's say, whatever, reset password. And I have to specify what data to send. I have to click here. And I can pick any data that I want, right? I have the option to get data from an external API. It's like it's more flexible, but it's not as elegant as Adalo. That's why Adalo is really easy for simple prototypes. Whereas Bubble, it's like using a very specialized tool that allows you to do a lot of things. On the other hand, Adalo, it's like a screwdriver. You're using a very simple tool, but in 90% of the cases, it's going to get the job done. So I can pass the current user. I can do a search for completely unrelated data. I cannot do that in Adalo. In Adalo, I can't pass unrelated data. So for instance, this thing here, and I want to pass, user clicks, I can only pass data associated with what I'm working in. And when you start building apps, like I built a Tinder app just in a couple of videos before, I struggled with passing like unrelated data because I was doing it in a way where I needed to get data that has nothing to do with this list. And that was difficult to do. And I did it eventually, but I was a little stumped. Whereas here in Bubble, I can pass any data that I want. And that has its own repercussions because this will allow you to perhaps build an app with a not such a clean architecture because you're going to be passing data that perhaps you don't need to pass. Whereas with Adalo, you can't really do that. So this is an important distinction. Very, very important to understand. When you're working with something, you have that data available to pass. When you are not working with it, you can't really pass the data. And once you start building apps in Adalo, you're gonna see it. You're gonna see it the Adalo way, and you're gonna figure out how to do it correctly. That is something that I had to learn when I initially started to build apps in Adalo. So the logic works very, very differently. One thing I really like about it though is that I can click on here. Let's say I have a button. And I can add another action. I can create a new user. I can update log the user. I can delete it. This thing is really nice. It always has this CRUD mechanism. So I can create, update, delete. I don't need to read anything, right? Because we're doing an action. reading is just displaying data, but here I have some actions related to it, right? So I have create, update, delete. With Bubble, it's not that easy. It's kind of easy, but the way you do it is you come in here and you go in here, data, and then you say create a new thing, make changes to a thing, delete things. So it's a little bit, they give you a lot of options, but it's not as elegant as you can do it with Adalo. At least that has been my experience. The next thing I want to talk about is the database. How do databases work? So with Adalo, once again, it's very, very elegant. So for instance, I have here my database here, and I can add a new collection. So right, I can create a new collection. Let's say customers, okay? And then let's say I want to add a new collection. This is going to be products. And I can link them together. So I can add a new property. This is going to be a relationship. So for instance, one customer has many products, and a product can have multiple customers, something like this. So you can just go in here. So what is this? This is our product. So I can go to customers, add property, relationship, products. And I can say this is a many-to-many collection. Because one product can be owned by many customers, and one customer can buy many products. So I can just do many-to-many here. And Adalo will now understand it. And now when you're doing some kind of an action, so let's say I have a list of customers, I need to add, products, maybe it's a shopping cart app. I can do it in my actions very, very easily. So I can go in here and I can do all that. The next thing about Adalo is that you can easily import CSV data here. You could import CSV, you can set permissions very, very easily. Another thing about it is that you cannot get data externally. So something like a REST API call, stuff like that, unless you pay, unless you're on a paid plan. So I was using their trial, and it says here, your integration pack trial is over. Your external collections have been paused. Upgrade now to continue using them. So essentially with Adalo, if you're on their free plan, you can only use the built-in data, which is, in most cases, is more than enough. You can build great apps, but you cannot get external data from somewhere else. So you need to go in here, update, and so it tells you here the free plan is this. You can get the pro, and you're gonna get here the external data once you upgrade to one of these plans. Now with Bubble, on the other hand, you have your data here. So I really like Bubble. So I don't know, both are interesting, but they do work very, very differently. I'm talking about the internal data, okay? Because with Bubble, all I can do, so I have my customers, I have my products, so I can go to customer and I can create a new field. And this field could be, let's say, shopping cart, right? Which is what we have. We have a shopping cart, which is a collection of products. So I can go in here and I can say, well, this is products, and this is a multiple entry. So I can say create. And now it's a little bit more intuitive, right? A customer can have a shopping cart. Let's say this is called a shopping cart, which is a list of products, okay? And these products, each of the products in this list is gonna be taken from here. So in the beginning, I found this model a lot more intuitive. Whereas with Adalo, it's also very intuitive, but the way it works, the way you can use it, the way you can implement a different logic on the data is gonna be very different. And so what I recommend, obviously, is to play around with the apps. I think for a lot of people, this is going to be a lot more intuitive. If you do not have a relational database background, if you've never done relational databases like MySQL or Postgres or Oracle or any of them, you're going to find the Adalo way a little bit less intuitive. At least that has been my experience. Whereas here, I go in here, I define my products, I go to app data, let's say I want to create a product, I just create a new entry. I have my products, and then to customers, whenever we have a customer flow, like I actually did a video about building an e-commerce store, then all I'm doing is I have on each customer, I have products. That's their shopping cart, which is essentially a list of products. And then I'm basically adding those products as an element inside that list. For me, it's very, very intuitive. Whereas with Adalo, you can do kind of the same, but you constantly need to ask yourself, okay, is this going to be a many-to-many relationship? Is this going to be a one-to-many relationship? Is this going to be a many-to-one relationship, right? You kind of have to get used to it. It took me a couple of days to get used to it. So now I'm fairly comfortable with it. But nevertheless, I think for a lot of people, Bubble's way is going to be more intuitive. Let me know in the comments below which one of these ways is going to be more intuitive, because I know everybody has a different, working brain. Everybody understands concepts differently. Maybe for somebody, Adalo is a no-brainer, and they don't understand, why would somebody do it the Bubble way or the other way. So you guys let me know which one of these methods or methodologies you guys find more intuitive. And then with Bubble, you also have free APIs. So all you need to do is install this API connector, which is essentially a plugin. It's a free plugin built by Bubble. This is one of the first things you typically install on a brand new app, and you can have your API. So here I have a new API. I can add a call. I have here an API call. I'm hooking up to a third-party service. I'm getting data. I'm sending data. So this is an action, which means I am pushing data. I'm actually writing data. If I specify as data, I would be getting data. And so it's very, very easy. And that is why if you're not paying for this plan, but obviously if you're building an app, you're going to be paying for service, right? If you're not paying, then with $1, you're not going to have access to APIs. But with Bubble, you're going to have access to the database and the APIs, which once again makes Bubble a great choice to test drive things. And then when you're ready to maybe build a mobile app, you're ready, to get a paid plan with $1, no problem. You can simply upgrade, and then you're gonna have access to APIs, and you can do pretty much everything that you can do with Bubble. Last but not least, I want to talk about data handling. Okay, so how do you display data? How do you show data? So it's actually very, very easy. You can just go in anywhere, any element, and you can just go to this box here, and you can have static text, or you can insert dynamic data. And once again, with Bubble, you have access to all the data everywhere, right? This is very, very important distinction. This is not even logic. This is kind of like, how do you display data? How do you, show data on the page that you need to show it to? So with Bubble, it's not really a question. It's a no-brainer. I can do a search for products, for customers, for users. I can do anything that I want. Even if I specify, let's say I have this element here, I have this group, and I say the type of content here is customers. I can come in here to name, and I can still, I can do a search for, I can go in here, I can do insert dynamic data, and I can do a search for completely unrelated piece of data. So I can have a lot of spaghetti here. I can specify that this is customers, but then I can go and pull up products or users completely unrelated to what I'm doing. With $1, you can't really do that, right? So let's say I have a list, I have a button here, and I have a list here. So let's say I come in here, I want to have a list. Let's say this is a list of users, or what else do we have? We have customers. Okay, so let's say this is a list of customers. I say this is a list of customers, and then I can filter it, I can sort it, I can do all that. Now, let's say I want to add an action. I want to add an action to this detail page. Okay, great. I can come in here, add an action. I can do a link to screen, and it's going to pass this data here. So I'm not going to have any access to any other data. So here, I can just go in here, and I can say, well, I want text. I can just say, and what am I going to do? I want to display, the name of the customer. Very, very easy. I can just add magic text, and we have here access to two pieces of data, right? We have the current customer, and we have the logged in user. I also have access to these unrelated data, but only as a count. You see, I can't really pull up third-party data. Now, this is very interesting because this allows you to create kind of clean apps, but you have to plan them correctly. You have to understand that the only data you're passing is relevant data, right? So for instance, I can say current customer's name, boom, it's there, right? I can just delete this. And now it makes sense, right? This is a list view. This is a detail view. This is what typically people do. I don't need to display, some other data here. It's not going to be related. But in Bubble, I can do anything that I want. Whereas here, the data handling is very, very different. I can drag and drop another label here, another text field here, and it's going to have access to the same thing. Add magic text. I also have access to logged in users and to current customer, right? So, and I can also display a count. I can do a formula, right? And the formula is going to be, same thing, right? I can just format it away. I can do a number format, singular prefix, plural prefix, singular suffix, etc., etc. So with $1, it's like a true kind of list detail way. I have a list. I need to have access to the detail of that. It gives you detail. But with Bubble, you can do anything that you want. You can pass a customer, and then you're going to have access to the customer. But you can do a search for, get an option. You can get data from an external API. So it's a lot more flexible. But you don't have to think as hard when you're building apps. I really like $1's way. I think it's very, very elegant. but you're going to be limited in some cases, where with Bubble, you're never going to be limited because you can pull up any data that you want on any page that you want from any, from any workflow that you want. So, that's a huge advantage. But with Adalo, it's a little bit different. And so that is kind of the 5 major things, right? And really the purpose of this video is to get you guys to think ahead. Because when you're building the app, do you want the flexibility of Bubble? Or do you want the flexibility of Adalo? Do you want to, do you want things to be simpler and a little bit more elegant, if you will, right? You have your list, I click on it, but if you click on the button, you don't have any, you can do a link to back to screen, and guess what? You don't have access to anybody, right? You don't have access to users, you don't have access to anybody. It's just a button. Right now, when you come in here, you're going to have access to generic data, but you can't query anything. So you guys got to start thinking, which is more up your alley? Are you an Adalo fan? Are you a Bubble fan? Which connects more with you? If I'm building a mobile app, right, it's going to have a list detail view. It's going to have some logic. I built a Tinder app. You can do that as well. You can watch one of my previous videos. There's a lot of apps that you can build. It's going to be very direct. It's going to be very straightforward. On the other hand, if you want to, have a lot of features, a lot of functionality, you're building a web app, you're building a web page, it needs to pull data from different places. You have a page, maybe a detail view, but it's going to have a detail for that specific record, but you also need to call an API for something completely unrelated. Then maybe Bubble is a better one. But if you're building a mobile prototype, there's nothing better than Adalo. If you're building a mobile app, there's nothing better than Adalo. If you're building something more complex, you're building web pages, you're building web apps, complex web apps, I would probably go to Bubble for that. And so that is all that I wanted to show you guys in this video. I really, really hope you've gotten value here. Let me know in the comments below if you enjoyed it. Don't forget to give this video a fat like if you've gotten value here. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. And I will talk to you guys real soon.